Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Today's necklace design project is a beautiful, lovely design, and what's really fun about it is it's going to utilize a pre-finished chain. Now, we sell a beautiful selection of, as far as styles, of pre-finished sterling silver chain, and this is actually tarnish resistant chain, so you won't have to worry as much about it turning over time. And the neat technique we're going to do is that we're going to end up cutting down in the center, and we're going to use beads to bead this necklace back together again. So the majority of your necklace is this beautiful chain with just some lovely beading in the front. What I've chosen to use for my beads are these beautiful 2mm faceted Amazonite semi-precious beads. And I do want to tell you that if you head on over to EurekaCrystalBeads.com, we have a fantastic selection of these teeny tiny faceted gemstone strands in a whole rainbow of colors. So if you like this project or any of the other projects where we've used them, you have a lot of color options to choose from. As far as the other things I'm going to be using in the necklace, I'm going to feature a couple of 10mm faceted jasper beads as well. I'm all about the semi-precious lately. I think it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, especially when it's faceted. And you'll notice I have 6 crimp beads here. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to be using 6 crimp beads to hold my necklace together. I'm only going to be using 2 crimp beads to hold my necklace together. These other 4 crimp beads I'm actually going to use as a design element and as a spacer on either side of these 2 larger jasper beads. And I really like these because the smoothness of the crimp is a nice contrast to all the faceting in the rest of the beads of the necklace. I'm going to have 2 crimp covers, of course, that's going to cover up the 2 crimps that I do use to hold my necklace together. And then as far as tools go, we'll need our flex cutters. These are used for cutting flexible beading wire. You don't want to cut things like head pins with them. You'll want to use a side cutter that's meant for that type of wire for that. You'll damage these cutters if you use them on the wrong kind of wire. So use these for your flexible beading wire only, and they will stay wonderful and sharp, and you'll get really great cuts on your wire. And then I have my standard size crimping tool, which is going to go along with my 2mm crimp beads down there. As far as the beading line we're going to be using, I'm using Soft Flex, which is my personal beading wire choice. And my also size of choice is the fine diameter, which is the 014 21 strand. And I'm actually using it in white. And the reason I'm using it in white is because in this particular project, I'm going to show you how lovely it is when you have to see a little bit of it. Because sometimes we can use French wire to cover up the little bits of wire, and I do prefer to do that if I was using the gray Soft Flex, but in this case we're using this beautiful, lovely, bright white, and so it's sort of okay if it gets seen a little bit because it's not that sort of gray color. It's a nice, bright white that's going to match beautifully with the brightness of the sterling silver. So in case you didn't realize, Soft Flex does come in a whole variety of colors, so make sure you go and check that on out as well. All right, so let's get started. What I'm going to do first is a little bit of math. So I'm starting with an 18-inch chain. If I cut right in the center and then I add beading into the center, that's going to add length onto that 18 inches. Now, depending on the length of the finished necklace I want, that might be fine, but I might end up with something that's too long. So I need to figure out if I actually want to cut out a little bit of chain, so that way my necklace doesn't get too long. Now, a neat thing you can do is with this chain that you cut out, in the event that we have to cut some out, you have a nice little piece of chain to make some matching earrings if you'd like. So you can definitely have plenty of uses for any chain that we cut out of the center here. So the strand of beads that I'm starting with, this is about a 12-inch strand. It's a little bit more than 12 inches. And I want to have 2 strands in the necklace beaded into the front, and I want them to be different lengths. So we get a beautiful layered look that's very, very easy to obtain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it down here, matched up, so my 2 lengths are the same. And then I'm just going to pull one of them a little bit longer. And that little inch or so means that there's going to be about a ½ inch of space in between the two layers on the necklace. So I'm just going to keep that in mind and move that down. I'll keep that in mind for when I go to actually bead up my strands. Now, that shorter strand is going to be the amount of length that gets added into your necklace as far as how it feels when you wear it. That longer strand, of course, will visually be longer, but as far as how it feels around your neck, it's the shorter strand that you want to be more careful of. So if this shorter strand is going to add in, see, about 5 inches or so, you want to make sure, well, is 5 inches additional length onto this 18 going to be a bit long? For me, I think that's going to be. So I am going to cut out a little bit of chain. So I'm going to make my clasp area meet up nicely, so that way I can just drag my fingers down and end up in the middle of the chain. Okay, so I cut myself out a little bit of that chain in the center, so that way my necklace doesn't get too long. I can put this aside and use it for any other type of project. And now we have a chain that is cut in the middle and it needs to go back together again. So we're going to be cutting some pieces of our soft flex. Now, normally if I was doing 2 strands, I could use one long piece and start at one side, crimp it, and have 2 pieces to bead, and then crimp at the other side. But we're gonna have something centered on each strand, which are these 10mm faceted jasper beads. So I am gonna cut 2 strands separately of my soft flex. Make sure you cut enough that you know your beads aren't gonna fall off the other end as you start to bead them up. Just used my flex cutter for that. Now, we're going to start in the center with our jasper bead, just like this. And then we're going to put a crimp bead on either side as a spacer. And this is what the center of both strands are going to be like. Only one strand, the inner strand, will be a little bit shorter, so it'll have fewer of the Amazonite beads on it. So I'm going to show you a trick for taking off the beads from these strands. Now, something that you may tend to do the second you get your beads in the mail and they come on strands is you may pull them all off and put them into a baggie. Well, my recommendation, my tip is put them in a baggie, sure, but leave them on the strand when they come on a strand. You can always pull them off later if you want them loose, but there's a great little trick for getting your beads off here that I think is really great. And having them on the strand makes that trick possible. So simply line up the beads nicely in between your fingertips here and then pull them off. And then you can usually take your soft flex and slide it right down a lot easier than picking up all of those beads individually. You can see there's just the one at the end that I had to do separately. But that's a much faster way to get these little teeny tiny beads onto your line instead of pulling them all off and then having to pick them up one at a time as if they were seed beads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my 2 strands beaded up, and I will show you what that looks like when I come back in a minute, and I'll show you how we attach it all together in our necklace. Okay, so I have my 2 strands beaded up, and as you can see, the design here is beautiful and simple and dainty. We have these really fun focals in the front, these cool little, this neat little use of the crimp beads as visual spacers and physical spacers, of course, but I think they're a nice contrast to all of the faceting that we have in all of the other beads. And a great way to tell if you are going to like how your 2 strands are sitting is once they're beaded up, grab them at one end so the beads sit together, and grab them at the other end so the beads sit together. Make sure they're pushed up nice and tight. And you'll get an idea of how they will lay when they're in the necklace. You can see we have about a little over ½ inch of space in between these 2 jasper beads here. So now what we're going to do is crimp them onto the end lengths of the chain here. So we're going to hold these 2 wires together as if they're one wire. And the only thing you want to be careful of is that your beads don't fall off the other end. So if you have some Scotch tape lying around, it's not always a bad idea to throw a little tape on there. I'm pretty confident I'll be okay, but can't hurt to be better safe than sorry. And what I love about this diameter of soft flex actually, and this is my favorite diameter to have around, is it will string through these teeny tiny little faceted beads, which some people at first glance may think that you would need something even thinner to get through them, but you don't. This lovely diameter of soft flex will go through them just fine. And you'll be able to use a single crimp for the 2 strands because a crimp can accommodate 4 passes of wire, which is what we'll get when we pass back down through the crimp bead. So I'm going to put both of my strands of wire through my crimp bead here. I'm going to put both of those strands of wire through the end link of our chain, just like that. And I'm going to fold them back and feed both of those strands as if they were one strand together back through my crimp bead. Just like this. So now the trick is just getting the crimp pushed up nice and tight against that link of chain. And you also want to make sure that there are two lines there, so you want to make sure that they get pulled evenly so you don't end up with one little loop that's bigger than the other. And that's what we get. So now we're going to use our crimper tool. If you need a good review of using a crimper tool, we do have some great crimping basics videos on our channel, but I'll go over it briefly here. We have our two little chambers. The second one back looks kind of like a little kidney bean. That's what we're using first. Get our crimp in there, give it a squish. Now we put our kidney bean up on its side and we put it in that front chamber that just looks like a regular oval. And that is going to fold our kidney bean in half, just like that. Now, we're going to trim off our little ends here, which you can do confidently as long as you knew that your crimp job was pretty good. And the last thing we're going to do is put a beautiful sterling silver crimp cover over that. And I really like using sterling silver ones because I'm using a sterling silver chain. So I like the continuity of sticking with the same type of metal. And I like to actually just stick them right into my crimper tool here. I find that's a nice, easy way to do it. And you give it a gentle squish. Crimp covers are very easy to close. They take just the right angle though. So you don't want to make sure that you're squishing too hard. If you're squishing really hard, you're not doing something right. You just want to gently nudge it shut and it will end up looking like a beautiful little silver bead. Now we're going to take our beads here. We're going to push them all the way down. Now at this point, our two wires are going to be different in length. So I find that for making this crimping part easier, I'm going to trim that longer one down so it's the same size with the shorter one. Just like that. We're going to stick both of these wires through our little crimp bead, through the other end link of chain, back down through the crimp bead. Now this side's a little trickier because we can't just take the crimp bead and push it up towards the chain because we have all this slack here. So what you're going to have to do is pull these two little tails in the direction towards the beads. Sometimes people try to pull up and that doesn't tighten up your crimp bead. You want to pull in the direction towards where the beads are. And that's going to start to pull things tighter. You can see this part tightened up here and now we just have a big loop. And we can start to pull our loop down. And you can even utilize another tool if you find it helpful. Like if you have a pair of chain nose pliers lying around, you can certainly grab those tails and pull them down a little easier if your fingers just get a little bit too slippery. As you can see, it pulls it up nice and snug, just like that. Now, because these beads are so dainty, don't be afraid if there's the littlest bit of wire showing there, because as the necklace curves, that's going to tighten up and it'll also allow your beads to sit a little more fluidly. So don't worry too much about that. And also the last little bit can sometimes tighten up when you actually go to crimp it. So we're going to utilize our crimper tool now. Get that crimp bead into our kidney bean chamber, give it a squish, put it up on its side, put it in the front chamber, give that a squish, folding our kidney bean in half. Take a good close look at it. Make sure that you can see that your wires going in and out of your crimp bead do have a little bit of a squish to them. Sometimes what can happen is if you don't do that first step of the crimper hard enough and you don't make as nice of a crisp, clean kidney bean, when you go to fold it in half, it can leave some hollow space. So you want to make sure that first step you do it nice and firmly. We can go ahead and trim these off. We'll get our final crimp cover on there. Feed it right down inside, give it a nice little squish. And the trick to getting those crimp covers shut really nicely is after you give it a little bit of a squish, sort of having it sit upright like a letter C in that front chamber, turn it so that way that little seam is facing up onto the roof of your crimper tool, and that will nudge it shut that last little bit that you need. Okay, beautiful. We have a lovely finished necklace featuring wonderful and super sparkly faceted gemstone beads. You can have fun playing with whatever color you like. We have a whole bunch to choose from, and we also have a whole bunch of different larger semi-precious beads that you could use as your focals here. But this little neat trick of using the crimpers as these spacers is a lot of fun, so it's another good reason to have plenty of crimps lying around. So that wraps it up, folks. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for all the materials used in this video and for any of your other beading and jewelry needs. Bye.